It's that time. I feel like it happens pretty much every Wednesday. I didn't even realize that that's the way it is. But we got our buddy David Harsanyi back in the mix here. He is a senior writer at National Review, and he is going to tell us a lot of things about many things. Mr. Harsanyi, good to have you back.
Always a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So I have to say, you you have worked in media for a while, and you've worked in some newsrooms where I think there were some liberals, I could assume, and there's so much I want to ask you about. But one thing is, they once again weren't able to ask the most basic questions about the Bubba Wallace situation, like where is the photo of this alleged noose? And I just do you think that it's because they're at the point where they're terrified to do their job as journalists because asking questions can be viewed as wrongthink? Or are there just a lot of really dumb liberal journalists?
I think that's begging the question. I would say that there's a little bit of a lot of things going on. I think that people are terrified to question the veracity of, a racial incident, because if it turns out to be true, they'll look like they didn't believe it, etc. But to some extent, or even a bigger extent, it's people who just assume that there are tons of racists in this country who are putting nooses all over the place, and that there's this it's paranoia about white supremacy. And I'm, of course, not saying that there's no racists here, but I think that the race obsession has gone a little bit nuts. So I think that the media acts in a way, not just the media, I think NASCAR itself and others are too scared to question these sorts of things or show healthy skepticism, because they either A, want it to be true, or B, are just terrified of being wrong. And I have to say, I was on Twitter, and when I first read about this, I was tempted to tweet out, how long before we learn this is a hoax. It didn't sound like something that it didn't sound real. I mean, I'm not saying it couldn't happen, but I thought there was a pretty high probability of it not being a hoax. And but I was a little nervous to say so myself. So you can see how.
Right. Well, can I say why, David? Because I had the same. Earlier in the show, you didn't hear this, but I said to the audience, because people reach out and they say, Buck, because I was somebody who was like, "Where's the photo, guys? Where's the photo? I want to see the photo." I mean, everyone knew that this was, but that's a legitimate question to ask. I mean, where's the evidence? How about some evidence? But the only reason that I think that it would be somewhat of a risk is, it's not that I think a white nationalist, neo-Nazi, a true racist. And I do think it's interesting that conservatives always feel the need to say, I'm not saying there's no racists. Yeah, I've never heard anyone say that. I've actually never heard a human being on any side of the political aisle say there's no such thing as racism, or I'm not saying there's racism. And David, I'm not pointing this out because you said it. I say it. We all have to say this all the time, which is, I think, in itself interesting, because it's like saying there's no such thing as immoral people or bad people. Well, yeah, nobody would say that, right? That's crazy. But in this instance, the possibility, I think, was there for someone to have put a noose there who is a friend to the cause, so to speak, of the left, to then say, look at how terrible this is. You know what I mean? I mean, essentially a false flag operation, which many cases of hoaxes like this, that's what's actually happened. Whereas here, it was never really a noose.
Well, I just want to quickly say, yeah, I mean, I could see that happening, but also, it could be real. There are stupid people out there. We all know that. And yeah, we do. I am always, doing the throat clearing about racism because we've been browbeat by it. And also because, it is out there and it's worth talking about. And that's what the conversation's about. But yeah, I mean, my problem with all this, though, is that you see people afterwards saying, hey, there was really nothing wrong with how we covered it because it turned out okay. There is no rate, et cetera. There is no, there was no news, et cetera. But the problem there is that they were rooting for it to happen, in my mind, because they want to show how bad America is. And we just move on to the next thing as if this poor reporting never happened. And then obviously the driver doubles down on it afterwards, and so do some journalists, and that makes me think even more that people are rooting for it.
Now, David, there's also these, and you're right, and that's another thing too. If this was the I mean, statistically, these noose hate crimes that, there are hate crimes. And David, I know you're familiar with your writing and your Twitter there are a lot of hate crimes against the Jewish community. There are a lot of hate crimes that happen that don't get the degree of attention that the media gives to certain incidents. And they're real hate crimes, which I always think is, hate crimes that are happening to people that aren't part of the Democrat narrative quite the same way. So they get much less of a focus. And then you have these hoax hate crimes. But yes, to your point, it is certainly possible that this could have happened with exactly the intent the media said. But that still doesn't answer, well, why wouldn't they ask the basic question so we could prove if that was the case? But I also now have this sense that the statue toppling has gotten so switching gears to that for a moment, the statue toppling that's going on is so out of control. They're going after Lincoln statues now. They're going after a statue that was dedicated by Frederick Douglass, for which the funds initially to build came from freed slaves. They want to destroy that statue now. Is there any point at which there's more criticism of this movement from within Democrat journo circles, or is it just everything is fair game on this?
Oh, no, there won't be, because they downplay this stuff all the time. I saw a CNN reporter, put a little wink emoji at mocking Republicans for constantly talking about this as if it's a big deal. This is how they function. If 200 Nazis show up somewhere, which is rare that they can actually get 200 people together in this country, it becomes a national story. We have to have a national conversation about hate, etc. But when you have Antifa roaming around the country tearing down statues of great Americans like Lincoln and others, not just Confederates, they ignore that other part is happening, and they try to downplay the looting, the rioting, the statue toppling, because it doesn't work with their narrative of what's going on. And that's what's been happening in the media. And it's getting frustrating, increasingly frustrating, because there's little you can do about it. And I think most American people probably aren't aware of how many of these statues are being toppled that are not, Confederates. I think they think it's all about Confederate soldiers, and toppling those, it's not okay either in my mind. I mean, if you want to take down a statue, go to the city council, etc. But, it's much worse than that, as you mentioned.
Yeah, and I feel like there's no word from, and the artistic community has been overrun by the left for a very long time. But some of these objects that are being destroyed have incredible value as works of art. I mean, put aside just the symbolism and the historical value of them, and there's no outrage. I mean, I saw this Sean King guy was saying, and now everyone's saying, oh, it's just Sean King. Okay, well, he is one of the most well-known Black Lives Matter protester, organizer, activist guys out there, and he's saying that Jesus statues that show Jesus as a white European is part of white supremacy. There's some other people that jumped in on this idea too. Torre, who used to have a show at MSNBC, magnified this idea. And I wonder, when do they have to come to grips with the fact that this does exist within the movement? I mean, I think that there are people who would make the case that some of the greatest works of art in certainly the Western canon are racist. I mean, the Sistine Chapel, depictions of Jesus in artwork that is truly priceless have to be considered racist now.
Listen, I think a lot of these people are dimwits, and that is more offensive to me than the actual.
That's the real answer, actually. I'm sorry, David. Go ahead. It's true, though.
I'm offended. I'm more offended by the historical illiteracy than anything else, right? I mean, and it wasn't just Sean King. I mean, it was Nicholas Kristof at the New York Times, 2 million followers. There's a huge voice saying that, Jesus was a man of color, and, authoritarians essentially framing the story of Jesus as a race, as a race crime, which, is just incredibly absurd. And I actually don't think he believes that that's true, but they try to transpose their grievances today onto history, and they give history no context. And that's why, you can tear down a Washington statue, because there's no context to it. He's a slave owner. They looked at a Wikipedia page. They searched slaves. They found slaves. They take down the statue, right? So, I think people are uneducated and stupid, and they want to recreate history in their own image. Yesterday, AOC, AOC is just so much easier. So said that Latinos are black, and she gave she followed it with some historical gibberish. And people take her seriously when they should be laughing at this stuff. It is a disaster how uneducated people are on history, and obviously it matters now. With what we see going on. I'm not a huge statue fan in general. I don't think it really upholds Republican virtues of America, but people who want to tear them down, want to tear history down. It's not really about the work of art or the statue. They hate history. They hate American history, and they hate the founding far more, I think, than the Confederacy, because to them, the Confederates are bad, but the real evil is the 1619 Project, or the real evil is the founding, and I think that's their ultimate goal.
Well, David, always appreciate you joining us to share your thoughts on these things. What are you writing about this week over at National Review?
Working on a magazine piece that should be interesting, but it's kind of embargoed, about Nixon and Trump. And I don't know. I'm going to see what else annoys me today and write about it. It seems to me that there's always at least 5 things going on that make me just so mad that I want to smash my computer. So
that's why we bring you here, David, so you could drop the knowledge bombs and get some of that angst out. We appreciate it. David Harsanyi, everybody, at National Review. Thanks, David.
Thank you.
Working from home is driving up one of the worst types of cybercrime out there: home title theft. You see, we're doing it all from home these days, right? We're working, we're banking, video conferences, meal deliveries, shopping. Cyber criminals are targeting our homes. Actually, what they want is the money that they can get by taking out loans against your home. The crime is home title theft. The FBI is warning people about it constantly. You see, your home's legal title is online. The bad guys can find it and forge your signature stating you sold your home to them. Then they take out loans on your home and leave you in debt. Banks, insurance, and basic identity theft services don't protect you. Home Title Lock is your answer. Home Title Lock puts a virtual barrier around your home's title. Protect your home now. Go to HomeTitleLock.com and register your address to see if you're already a victim. Use code BUCK for 30 free days of protection to help you through this crisis. That's code BUCK right now at HomeTitleLock.com. That's HomeTitleLock.com. Use code BUCK. We got a buddy of ours joining from the Daily Caller, where he does most excellent work, and he has been covering the insane protest down in D.C., the Black House Autonomous Zone effort, the pulling down of statues or attempts to pull down statues. And he's the guy who got that audio, some of the audio of these protesters just making complete fools of themselves. So we want to ask him about what he's seeing. Henry Rogers with us now. Henry, my man, how you doing?
Hey, Buck, thanks for having me, man. Good to see you.
You too. So, I know most people that are going to hear this can only hear it. Some people watching the first will be able to see it. But I got to say, the mustache suits you, man. The mustache is a good move. I don't know if you're a cop from the 70s or an airline pilot, but you're one or the other.
I appreciate it. You're one of the few who have complimented it. So I will keep that in mind. Thank you, Buck.
I'm a fan. So tell me this, man. How are things going down there in D.C.? What's the latest?
So I don't know if you've seen it, but I'm sure you have, as you follow the news closely. So a group of protesters have essentially taken over this one block area, which Mayor Bowser has claimed as the Black Lives Matter Plaza. The protesters have now been calling it the Washington the Black House Autonomous Zone here in Washington, D.C. So this is all a block away from the White House. Yesterday, I was actually at the White House, and I decided to stop by for a quick, walk by of these protests that have been going on. And it was really stunning to see what was going on in broad daylight. You would think things were peaceful. You would think things were calm, but it's quite the opposite of what I saw. And I think in the videos that I've posted onto my Twitter and things like that, you can see, first off, Andrea Mitchell and a black congresswoman were attacked in the middle of the street by what appeared to be transgender protester, who just started charging at them. A man.
Well, I saw this. Wearing lingerie, right? And just lingerie.
Right. So that was just, about 5 minutes into me being there. And I thought maybe I should stick around to see what else breaks loose here.
And what have you been hearing from the protesters? I mean, obviously you can record what they're saying, why they're there. How many of them are even talking about George Floyd? And also, are you able to ask them questions directly, or do they know Daily Caller is the enemy?
Well, it takes a little while for me to blow my cover. I'm probably about an hour. So I had some time. But, I was asking these people questions, and I was getting in their faces and asking them about, it's just because I saw so much odd things going on. For example, there was this one white girl who continued to shout in the faces of these black police officers, screaming vulgarities at them, very obscene things. This white, very privileged girl in her little Lululemon joggers outfit, just screaming at these black police officers about how Black Lives Matter and how they're racist and how they don't get it. So in my videos, what I did was I asked them, and I asked these people who were screaming at the black cops, I said, do you realize you're white and you are yelling at a black person at a Black Lives Matter rally? Does that make sense to you? And you could see that a lot of them were a little perplexed by the question, and then try to kind of defend themselves, saying that they're trying to learn about racism, and this is the best way that they can learn how they suffered is by shouting at other black officers. So the whole thing is honestly very disgraceful and very discouraging to see, considering it's George Floyd has been buried and his family has been calling for peace. So this is not very peaceful.
Did you see a lot of George Floyd signs and chants, or has it just turned into a general left wing?
I did not hear George Floyd's voice once. I did not hear George Floyd's voice once yesterday.
His name?
His name. I did not hear his name once yesterday.
That's I think that's really indicative of what's happening with these protest movements across the country. What's the expectation in Washington, D.C.? Is Mayor Bowser going to just allow this to continue? And is there any way that Trump, he said he's going to start, and we've only got about a minute, but he said he's going to start enforcing the law against vandalism. Are we seeing that happening?
Well, so the National Guard will be in D.C. tonight. I know that is a new revelation here. I think the president has obviously been watching what's been going down just outside of the White House, and he's probably sick of it, as we saw with the last go around of these protests. So I do think that this will change. I don't think it will change from Mayor Bowser's standpoint. Again, defund the police is still painted on the cement. Not a thing has been removed. There's been no plans for that to be removed. So I don't see her acting quickly on this anytime soon.
Henry Rogers, everybody. He is the man down on the scene. Henry, get us more of this first-person stuff. Come back and tell us how it's going on. And he's over at the Daily Caller. Follow him on social media. Henry, thanks so much, man.
Thanks, Buck.
All right, everybody, roll call time. And just remember, if you want to leave a voicemail, which I think people find a fun addition to the Freedom Hunt, you can call in on 844-900-2825, 844-900-BUCK. Please keep the voicemail to under a minute. We've expanded it under 60 seconds, okay? That's the only... After 60 seconds, producer Mark or producer Brandon this week will be hitting the delete button, most likely, unless you're telling an amazing story, and... Then I leave that to their discretion. But nonetheless, keep it under 60 seconds. Under 30 seconds, even better if you can. Or, 30 seconds, let's say, is the sweet spot. So with that, if you want to send in your thoughts, which we obviously want to keep happening every day, Facebook.com/Buck Sexton or TeamBuck@iHeartMedia.com. Also, BuckSexton.com for news updates throughout the day and more stuff coming up on BuckSexton.com. Glenette writes in first, Buck, I have been rereading 1984. Wow. Now in our country, it is happening, which is very scary. Big Brother's slogan, which is war is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength, could be the slogan of the Democrats of today. Even Winston's job, which is to destroy and rewrite history, seems like a page out of today's current events. This is evident in the destruction of monuments, banning of certain books, as well as the rewriting of history, such as the 1619 Project. The manipulation and propaganda that is going on is staggering. Maybe everyone should reread 1984 as well as Animal Farm, as you have suggested on your show, to get a clearer picture of where our country is currently headed. I know most people do not have any clue as to where this path leads. 1984 shows it will be a stark reality. Do you have any thoughts on how to expose the Democrats' endgame for others to see? Shields high. Well, Gwinnett, a most excellent message here. Thank you so much for sending in for roll call. 1984 is one of the few books that I can tell you I have reread 3 times over the course of my life. Animal Farm, I think I've reread 3 times as well. And I will tell you, each time you go back, you will see more. Each time you read it, you will pick up things that you might have missed or forgotten from the first time. It's very worth it. And it's not like saddling up to read the Gulag Archipelago by Solzhenitsyn, which I also recommend very much to you, but that's a big investment of time. That's going to take you a long time to get through. So I'm very pleased that you're finding a lot of worthwhile insight from Orwell's 1984. Orwell, remember, was a pen name. George Orwell, his real name was Eric Blair. So it's absolutely eye-opening how much was seen then by Orwell and is being replayed in different ways right now. As for how to expose the Democrats' endgame, how do I expose the Democrats' endgame? I try to do that every day on the show. It's increasingly clear what their endgame is: socialism, authoritarianism, a radical Marxist redo of American society in every sense, and the rewriting of our history and creating what Scalia referred to as racial entitlements, things like reparations and affirmative action. Supreme Court Justice Scalia referred to it as the racial entitlement state or racial entitlement system, and enshrining that into permanent law. I mean, these are things that are going to this is what the end state actually is of the left-wing Democrat movement, and it's a question of whether we can mount some kind of a response. Last night I went on a little bit of a Twitter tear, and I'm also on Parler now, Buck Sexton on Parler, because I do think that they're just going to start Twitter. What's going to happen is as we've been discussing, they've censored Donald Trump for saying things that are completely fine, and there's a clear left-wing bias, and they don't care what it's going to do to the perception of that company, really. The people that run it, what matters to them most is the wokeness. What matters to you if you're a senior VP of, strategic communications or whatever at Twitter or at Facebook or any of these companies is, do all of your liberal friends, because all of your friends are liberals, who live in the San Francisco Bay Area, do they think that you work for a company that is woke or not? Or are you doing your part for wokeness, which is just left-wing mob political correctness? That's what wokeness is. That matters more to these senior executives than whatever the actual future of the company is going to be once they start doing this, because there's already this flight to Parler that is happening. Parler's been around for a while. It's an alternative to Twitter. Seen social media giant get taken down yet by a competitor because of conservative politics. That has not really happened. I mean, people would say, "Oh, MySpace," and he said, "No," but that was from within the digital left-wing sphere. Were not conservative political challenges by any stretch. And also this thing, Friendster, MySpace, these were the original social media platforms before Facebook came along. I think that what you're going to see on Twitter is, once it becomes clear, not only that they do have a bias against conservatives, but that big name conservatives are going to other platforms and freely sharing their thoughts without fear of being banned. Then they're not going to try to turn around. They're just going to say, fine, we'll just be a place where you can hear Justin Bieber's latest thoughts or whatever, right? I mean, they don't, you can just have MSNBC, the New York Times, and then a lot of really stupid celebrities and musicians waxing philosophical about life and politics. And that's what Twitter will become. But that's still a very large audience. Twitter is overwhelmingly a liberal audience still. And it's, I think, less than 5% of the American population is really active on Twitter on a regular basis. So it's a very small subset of the U.S. population. Anyway, just using that as an example. But they're going to, the purge is going to happen. I mean, they're going to try to do this in a subtle way. It's going to be like how people go bankrupt gradually, then suddenly. The purge of conservatives off the social media platforms is going to start. You're going to see a little more and a little more. And then eventually it's going to be like, all right, we're just kicking off people that won't, have the raised fist and hashtag BLM in their bio. That's where all of this is heading, I think. Jared Buck, can the mayors and governors of blue states that did nothing to protect their states and cities be arrested and charged with treason? Jared, the answer is no. One of the great protections that all these Democrats have, whether we're talking about the deep state or any number of other things, one of the great protections for them is that if you're a bureaucrat or elected official, stupidity is always a defense of some sort, right? I was just too incompetent. I was too dumb to know any better. You see that with the deep state actions of the FBI against Trump and Trump associates. Oh, yeah, we just believe this dossier put together by Christopher Steele, even though it was absurd, and anybody who's not a moron should have known, well, we're just morons. We believed it. Sorry, FBI is really dumb. That's it. That's all they have to do to evade accountability. And that is what they are doing. So there will not be any charge of treason against these individuals. And, I think that's while they're betraying, in a sense, the people that are counting on them to protect them and to enforce the law, as a legal matter, treason is not even part of the discussion. Bethany, but Jared, thank you for writing in. Bethany, if voters elect Joe Biden, will the chaos stop? The anarchy, riots, lawlessness, etc., if the Democratic Party is in office? Doesn't it seem to be an out-of-control train no matter what? Well, I'll tell you, this brings me back to what happened last night, where you did have people, at least in one instance, or in a few instances, liberals even saying this has gone too far. I mean, Chris Hayes, who's a big lib over at MSNBC, he's a host at MSNBC, and he's very woke, he really, because he sort of looks and sounds like what the left considers an intellectual. I don't mean sounds like because he says smart things. I mean, he seems like someone who is, I'm just a nerd, but like a cool, woke, hipster nerd. He tweeted out, so the Madison crowd last night, this is about what happened in Madison, Wisconsin, quote, knocked over the statue of an abolitionist immigrant who died fighting for the Union, a statue commemorating women's suffrage, and beat up a 60-year-old state senator and left him lying on the ground. Do any liberals want to try to defend any of that? A statue about women's suffrage? A guy who was an abolitionist who died fighting to end slavery? You're going to topple that statue? And beat up a state senator. Assaulted. Hey, here you go. Wisconsin state senator. I'll give you the guy's name. You had State Senator Tim Carpenter. He was heading to the state capitol, according to the Washington Post, to work late Tuesday. He stopped to snap a photo of the protesters. He said, quote, I don't know what happened. All I did was stop and take a picture, and the next thing I'm getting 5 or 6 punches and getting kicked in the head. Carpenter said he may have a concussion and a fractured nose, bruised eye, sore ribs and back. He said this has got to stop before someone gets killed. Libs are not going to stop. They're not going to stop it because they're cowards. They have no moral code or core. The left is morally rotten. Yeah, say it. The Democrat Party is morally rotten to its core. It is a socialist, Marxist movement bent on nothing other than the acquisition of power and the imposition of an authoritarian rule to equalize everything in ways that will never occur and that will be deeply destructive when they try to do it. You know, like what the Soviet Union did. Not a good idea. Not a good move. All right, next up in our roll call action, we have Sarah. Here we go. Oh, wait. Bethany, I didn't even really give you the full answer. I just realized this as we went into a pause there. It will stop for a while if Biden wins the election, but they'll always be, because the mob is a part of the Democrat Party. This is the wing. This is the action arm of the Democrat Party today in America. So they'll always be there for when they can't get their way through normal politics and through the normal means of our republic and our system of government. They'll be there to coerce, to threaten, to destroy. So they are the shock troops of the Democrat Party. That's what I've been saying all along. Tucker said it last night on his show, and you know I've been saying it here on this show for weeks. Sarah, I understand that vaccines have their use, and I am not anti-vax. However, I have heard lots of hype about a vaccine for COVID-19, that it should be mandatory. My question is, why would we need, as in force people to receive, a vaccine for a sickness of which there is a 99% recovery rate? This is not a free choice in my book. Never mind that we aren't allowing time for testing. I am not excited. Sarah, I haven't seen where it is said that it would be mandatory. I haven't seen that, so I have to look at what that is. That at the state level? Would that be a federal mandate? I will say that this disease, if there is a vaccine that is safe and effective, the disease is very dangerous to people who are seniors. It is very dangerous if you're a senior to get this, and so there will be a lot of pressure. Now, how effective is the vaccine? Is it lifetime immunity for the people who take it? But there's a lot that we have to look at and see here. But in general, I'll say that there seems to be a lot of precedent, a lot of legal precedent for restricting certain freedoms and rights. If you don't get a vaccine, like you can't go to public school, you got to have a vaccination record. So there's going to be a tension here. But let me look, Sarah, more into what's being suggested, and then I'll have a better, more specific answer for you. Ted writes, hey, guys, it's been tough lately for anyone paying attention. Hate to say it, but it may be too late. The election will not matter because if Trump wins, chaos will be the new norm. If he loses, we will live in a communist society. This has absolutely nothing to do with racism and has everything to do with communism. We are a good, peaceful society, but don't know how to fight these absurdities that they are pushing the silent majority in a very dark corner with. Be safe, guys, and shields high. Well, Ted, I don't think you're wrong about the danger that we face right now as a country. I do think that there's a little bit more room for optimism. So that's a good thing. I think we're in a little bit of a better place than you're currently thinking we are. Maybe just because I like to be optimistic and I can't even really back this up with facts. But we need to learn as a movement. I mean, conservatism needs to have, we need to have conservatism in control of platforms. We need to have conservative culture. We need to have corporations and very powerful entities in the business world that will stand for conservative values, that are willing to be boycott proof. You know, we need those things. We need to set that. That needs to become a part of this movement. Just having think tanks churning out stuff and a couple of pretty small scale publications, one cable news channel, and, you know, talk radio, which, as we know, talk radio is also coming under a lot of pressure from the digital. I mean, the actual, you know, AM radio band is coming under a lot of pressure from the digital world that we all live in now. It's not enough to just have good ideas. We have to control some of the platforms and control some of the distribution mechanisms, and also have, you know, conservative culture. Here's an example of what I mean. If I have a screenplay for what I think is a great movie, I should know that there is a place I can go to get it made, or to get a show made, let's say, where it'll be a Netflix, not that has to be openly conservative, but that they will say, look, we will look at conservatives and conservative ideas without shutting it down. That's all. We need that. We don't have that right now. And we need to stop pretending that that what's happening in the market is fair or even market-based. It is ideological. It is ideological. So Sam writes, Buck, thank you so much for spreading the truth to America. My dad recently introduced me to your show, and I love it. And to producer Mark, I say keep on being hilarious and giving Buck a hard time. Love you all so much. Everybody, thank you so much. Sam, thank you for having the buck pass to you. I love hearing that. Hope you enjoyed the show today. Do me that favor, pass the buck. Get one person to start listening to the podcast. That's my early Christmas and birthday present. We will be back tomorrow, same time, same place. Shields high.